Welcome to the Reinvention Code. I'm your host, Dorinda Walker. Reinvention isn't random, it has a code. On this podcast, we'll explore what it really takes to navigate life's transitions with introspection, faith, and strategy. If you're evolving, rebuilding, or stepping into a new season, you're not just starting over, you're leveling up. Let's decode your next chapter together. Hey, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of the Reinvention Code. I'm your host, Dorinda Walker. Today's episode is a special one for me because I'm welcoming my very first guest on the show, and I truly couldn't think of a better person to start these conversations with. Shirell Gross is a globally respected legal executive who has served as global chief counsel, advising senior leadership on complex legal strategy, corporate governance, and emerging issues like artificial intelligence and technology risks that are reshaping global business. Her career reflects influence, sharp strategic thinking, and a seat at the table where some of the most important decisions inside multinational companies are made. But the story we're exploring today goes far beyond title, because beyond the success is a woman who has navigated profound personal loss and made the courageous decision to pause a prestigious legal career to pursue deeper personal growth and reflection. During that season, Shirell stepped away from the practice of law and became a certified life coach, expanding her understanding of leadership, healing, and what it truly means to live an integrated life. In this conversation, we talk about ambition, grief, and the quiet but powerful work of rebuilding after loss. We also explore how success begins to look different when leadership, legacy, and humanity are all sitting at the same table. Please join me in welcoming Shirell Gross. Shirell, welcome.
Oh my God, I'm your first guest. You totally didn't tell me that. I'm so honored. Okay.
Well, thank you for, accepting the invitation. Let's get right to it. So, when people read your bio, they see power, global chief counsel, awards, influence. But who was Shirell before the title?
I mean, that's a great question. You know what? I would probably think about it as who was Shirell before the titles and who is Shirell right now, because I don't think I've changed much. And I think if you talk to my family, they probably would say she's kind of the same person she's always been. So, in that respect, I think I've always kind of loved learning. I've always tried to have some goal in front of me, whether it's personal or professional. I always sort of like to be around people. I like to relationship build. I always like to do some type of service. So I think I've always sort of been the same type of person. I like to have fun and I like to be around good people. And I just like to connect, with people individually. So I think I'm pretty much the same.
All right, we have that in common because I love to connect with people, learn
Yeah.
from each other. And you said you love to learn. So,
Yeah.
is that part of what shaped your ambition early on? Your need to learn new things?
Yeah. What probably shaped my ambition is my mother. My mother was a 14-year-old single mom, and everything she did when I was growing up was always, every decision she made was always sort of based on how can I give her the best opportunity to just be successful in life as a young mom. And I never really felt that she was as young as she was, really. I mean, I always felt that she was so much older than me. Now that we're both older and we're closer in age, I'm like, boy, you were young when I think about the times that she was going through. But because that was always her focus, it always produced a certain ambition inside of me to always want to be the best. So whether it was in her enrolling me in busing programs so I can get bused out of the inner city into the suburbs, or finding a Black women organization to be mentored, or making sure I had the right, school or the right program. Because she always did that, and I love learning and I love excelling, it was a natural, organic way for me to be. So I think, and I saw her. I mean, she was just a person that just made things happen. She never had excuses, never. And she just was always on the go and always changing and always trying. So I think she really instilled the ambition inside of me.
I love that testimony about your mom. Because,
Yeah.
as we grow up, we see our parents as these hero type figures. What have you learned about your mom as a woman?
When I think about her now, I think that she never really had a childhood, right? She was a mother so young, and then she was out on her own so young. And she just didn't have a chance to do what normal teenagers do. I mean, at 14, she was raising a child and working and picking up a child for daycare and going home and doing homework. I mean, she's always talks about how she graduated on time, which is a great thing. And so as a woman, I look back and think about, wow, what was that like for her? And I remember just her being young and having a male friend and not being able to really experience that type of male friendship the way other young people can because she had children at home. And she married my stepdad, and we recently lost him. He passed away in December. But I'm looking at her now as sort of a grieving widow, having been with him for 35 years. And I saw a vulnerability in her that I'd never saw before. And it just really shocked me because I said, wow, I never saw that part of her as a woman loving this person as a wife. And not to say I didn't see them engage with each other, but I didn't see her like that. I always saw her as my mom, but not as a woman who loved her husband. So I see it very differently. And now I think about my own grief journey and watching her go through her grief journey. And it's just such a different attachment that I think I have with her.
Yeah, I love that. And first, I want to say so sorry for the loss of your stepdad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll say a prayer for your mom because I know
Yes.
that grief journey was
Yes.
important.
Absolutely.
But I love you sharing that vulnerable side of your mom and seeing her in
Mhm.
that. So, what shaped your ambition early on? Were you always this driven?
Yes. I mean, I'm probably the least driven now that I've ever been in my life, and I'm sure people will be very shocked because I'm always doing something different and trying something different. Sometimes very afraid and doubting myself, and then I have to convince myself, Girl, just do it. Stop thinking about it." And right now, I think I'm more in the reflective stage, so I don't always jump at things immediately right now. I think about it a little bit more. And I think that's the difference with my ambition. And I don't necessarily have a defined outcome of what success looks like for me versus before. I was always on the next step. And my friends used to always laugh, and colleagues. I would be in a job and I'll be thinking about the next job. I will be doing something, I'll be thinking about the next thing. And I was all over the place all the time. And now I'm probably not as, not to say that I'm not ambitious, I just don't have the same level of ambition that drives like that striving behavior like I did in the past.
I can totally relate to that because now I'm 55. I just turned
Yeah,
55 last month. And I can honestly say that if it doesn't serve a purpose for me, the answer is no.
absolutely.
Yeah. So love that. Okay. So after reading my LinkedIn post, you texted me and you said, I know what loss and starting over feels like.
Mhm.
So what did that season look like for you?
Well, when I read your post, I mean, I know, obviously I've known you even before this podcast, so I knew that you lost your husband and I knew the impact that it had on your life. But when I read your post and I read about what you wanted to do for others, at first I thought, oh, I mean, I know, she knows I know. I'll just, no, but let me just let her know because that is an important part of grief when you put yourself out there and someone else acknowledges your loss. A lot of times people don't want to acknowledge your loss. They're like, oh, I don't want to say anything. Well, it's not going to make your grief go away. Yeah, sometimes people say silly stuff, but it's not going to necessarily make your grief go away. And I thought, I'm just going to reach out to her and basically say, hey, I see you and I hear you. And I thank you for providing this opportunity for people to kind of talk about their grief. And And for me, when you asked me, "Oh, can you come on?" It wasn't really what I was expecting and not the why, but I do know that I've learned over time how important it is for people to hear my story because I think when people see, like you said, people see a person and they think that their life has went on a certain path and not necessarily understanding that that life may have come with a lot of pain. And when they hear other people's story, it gives them hope that they can just get up the next day.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. And that's why I'm so open to sharing my own personal story. And there are times when you have to be vulnerable, but I think when people are going through something and they see people who have went through the same thing, it gives them hope that they can get through it, and it lets them know that they're not going through these things alone, right?
Right.
So, tell us about what started your grief journey, what type of loss you had in your life.
A year after I had my first son, I surprisingly became pregnant again. And it was a bit of a surprise. And we were very happy. We were living in Brooklyn, young couple out there just trying to make it in the world. And I was at a deposition and my water broke. Now, I had no problems with my first pregnancy. So, of course, I couldn't believe that my water broke. And I knew what it was. I didn't understand what the impact of it was. And I remember a nurse coming into the bathroom with me because that's where my water broke. And and I said, I think my water broke. And she said, your water did break, and let's get you to the hospital. I wasn't prepared for what I was going to hear, which was the pregnancy is over. I was just about short of 6 months. And they told me I had a choice because of the how long the pregnancy had gone, that I can deliver the baby or I could, you know, have a DNC to have the baby removed. And I never really publicly told anyone sort of my decision at the time because I was always kind of ashamed of the decision that I made because the nurses at the time told me you don't want to see your baby because you'll never get that image out of your mind. And so I went with the surgical removal option. And for me, not to say that that's not the right decision for others, for me, it wasn't the right decision. And after having my baby, going home and no one warned me that all the parts of the body that prepares for the baby will still happen. So my breast milk came in, I got engorged as I did my first son. I was devastated. There was no real care and concern for me. I was lonely, I was upset. It was awful. And I was so lost and I was so sad. And what motivated me is I looked at this little boy who was like a little over a year. And I remember he kicked me in my breast, and my breast was so engorged. And I just ran to the bed and I cried. And I said, God, how could you make this happen to me? And, but I had this little boy to raise. So I got myself together. And over time, my husband and I, we moved on, got pregnant again, and knew it was going to be probably a high risk pregnancy. Decided to go with this one particular high risk doctor, and my water broke again, 6 months, this time at work in the stairwell. And one of my colleagues came into the stairwell with me, but I've been through this, so I knew what this was. And she was trying to reassure me, and she came with me to the hospital. And the doctor came in and basically told me the same thing. I had some complications the second time, which made it a little bit more difficult because I was bleeding. But in this particular hospital, the doctor himself wasn't the most caring. The nurses were amazing. They understood my pain. But I will tell you, the hospital had the best perinatal loss program. And they put you on another ward. I decided to deliver my baby. Of course, my baby was stillborn, small, but the hospital provided a gown for her, a hat, and my friends came to visit her in the hospital. So that was that validation that I did have a child. And they also provided a list of funeral homes that had agreed to volunteer to help women who have who had stillborn babies or a baby that will pass immediately after birth. And the funeral home was amazing. So that made a very traumatic situation much easier to handle because I was surrounded by an institution that understood what we just went through. And and so after we suffered that loss, my church family was very good. We had like a funeral and it was kind of a big thing. We had people at the house. And so, but then we went on that journey and I was left to grieve. And I remember my mother-in-law being so sad. And my mother-in-law saying to me, "It's okay to be mad at God, He can take it." I was so mad because I'm like, why would you take my baby? And all these mothers don't even take care of their children. And it was just a very, very hard time. But we had a lot of support. And my husband, he had to be there to pick up all the pieces because I just couldn't do that. I lost my child, and this was the second child I lost. We kind of got ourselves back together, went back to life as life be lifing. I then went to see another doctor, had a lot of hope because this doctor was an amazing, amazing doctor. He put a cerclage in, so I was, a little bit more hopeful. I went on bed rest earlier this time, and my water broke again. And at this time, I was at a doctor's appointment, and the doctor probably saw that the water that I was probably effacing, I think they call it, and he sent me home and he was covering for my doctor. And so when I came back the next morning, my doctor realized that my water had broken. And we went to the operating room, and my doctor was devastated because he was off that day. And he had to tell me that this had happened again and that he was so devastated because he felt that I came to him as the last hope. I remember him walking up to me with tears in his eyes, and I screamed in the operating room because I couldn't believe that this was happening again. I was like a fog. I'm like, this cannot be happening again. And I never saw my husband so sad. The profound sadness on his face just got me. And my doctor crying his sadness, and I'm in this cold operating room, and we delivered our baby. We had a chance to see, again, say goodbye to our baby. And it was beautiful because the nurses understood what we went through. And so the hospital had a similar perinatal loss program. They didn't have the funeral home support, but I called the other funeral home that I called before, and they said, we will make arrangements to come pick up your baby. And they did. And so I was able to give my children the dignity of their their body being handled with extraordinary care and love. And so that will always sort of be a part of our journey, is that our babies, we were able to, you know, see them and hold them and love them and touch their fingers and all of that. And we weren't able to do that for our first child, but we were able to do it for our other two children. So our first child, we named her, she was a girl, we named her Maya. Our second child, we named Michaela. And our third child, we named him Brandon because he was a boy. So we name our children. We made our children's lives a part of our kids' lives. And so we will never forget that they existed. And it's fairly chilling because most people don't talk about stillborns. And I would speak to women who are older who had stillborn babies, and they would tell me how shamed they were because that's how it was back then, particularly in certain religions. And me talking about it really is my faith, and also knowing in Ecclesiastes that, God talks about having faith like a stillborn baby is, brought into the world. And so if God can claim and name a stillborn baby, we certainly can. So I just, I'm happy and proud that they are a part of our life.
Well, first, I want to say I commend you for sharing that story because I can't imagine the grief, the loss, the pain, and all the feelings that come with it. What did you learn in that season about advocating for your healthcare needs? Because I think that's a big issue now with Black women who are going through pregnancy.
Well, I mean, it's actually a great story because when I obviously I got pregnant again. We weren't trying, so we always tell a big joke about my youngest son Caleb how he got here. We're like, we don't know how he got here because we weren't even trying. And my husband was very adamant, but my doctor was like, please just try again. I will not take a vacation. So we got pregnant. And we went to back to our doctor. He was so happy, Dr. Claire Antoine. He was so happy. He didn't take a vacation. But even so, he is one of, if not the best doctor on the planet. But yet, I've been through this 3 times. And I was a woman that was very focused and not going through this again. And he put me on bed rest at 3 months. So I had time. And so I would read a lot. And I said to myself, it's my body. And I am not going through this again. So you have to get educated on what your condition is. And I was not shy about asking him questions. I was at his office every week. I did never waited for an appointment because I would walk right in. But the most critical part was I read something about progesterone being something that was new that potentially can help women prevent them from going into early labor. And it was very, very new at the time. And I talked to him about it and I did the research and I called a few because I used to be a male defense attorney and I called like, a doctor or two. And I asked them, what do you think about this? And I called friends and then I asked him about it. And to his credit, he didn't say, that's just hogwash. We're not going to worry about that. He said, I'm going to look into it and I'll think about it and I'll get back to you next week. And he did. And I did go on progesterone. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I went through this 3 times and I didn't go through it the fourth time. I really credit that to us, me and my doctor having a clear conversation, him being committed, not to go on vacation because he was so impacted by the loss himself. And he was always there. And because we both collaboratively worked together, my son Caleb was born. And I call him Caleb Antoine, named after Dr. Antoine is the middle name. And and so I do think that you have to advocate for yourself. You have to study up on what your condition is, what could be some of the new trends and new research out there, and you have to come to your appointments, well informed.
Well, thank you for sharing that. You're the second woman that I've heard that
Mhm.
had that condition where they needed progesterone. And I want to say for any woman out there, whether you're a mother, a grandmother, or someone who's looking to have children, I want you to make sure that you advocate for yourself, do your research, and make sure you have a support system because I think that's important. And like you said, Shirell, the right doctor,
Right.
because sometimes we don't. We will interview people to come and fix our homes and all these
Right.
different things, but we automatically sometimes assume that a doctor has our best interest at heart, and we know that's not always the case.
No, not they have to want the same outcome that you want.
Exactly. So we talked about pregnancy loss and how it
Mhm.
impacts you as a mother, but it
Mhm.
also impacts fathers differently. And you talked about your husband being a rock for you. But what have
Right.
you learned about how men carry grief,
Mhm.
especially husbands who feel pressured to be the strong one? And what advice would you give to couples who may be
Mhm.
experiencing something similar?
And men, they hold it in a lot more, right? We have different outlets, right? We talk to each other. I mean, women, we can meet someone for 5 minutes and we could probably potentially tell our whole life story. That's just how women are. And men don't. That's just naturally not how men communicate. So I think for my husband, he always had to pick up the pieces. He's the one that had to make all the arrangements. He's the one that had to speak with everyone. And because of that, he had to hold a lot in. And I think my husband just never had the outlet that I had. And he's not speaking to other men. I had the benefit of speaking to other women. And I think there's probably a part of him that felt like, wow, I wasn't carrying the baby. So I don't know what her pain feels like, which probably made him suppress his own pain. So I think for men, we have to open the door of opportunity to give them a voice to speak about what their pain is so that they can also just have that space.
I'm
Yeah,
glad you said that. I recently read a stat that
yeah.
80% of the suicide rates in this country are from men.
Wow.
And, that tells me that men are in crisis.
Yes.
I started this reinvention code, you know, ChatGPT said it should be for women. That's your core audience. And I said, no,
Mm,
this needs to be gender neutral because we all experience the same things. How we handle it may be different,
right.
from a male perspective versus a female perspective. But I
Right.
think these conversations can help regardless of your gender.
I agree. Yeah, you just got to give them. I mean, even to this day, I don't think he's ever had the opportunity to express it the way I have. I think because we made our children's lives a part of our life and we didn't walk away from it, at least I think hopefully that he knows that he has the opportunity, if he ever feels like it one day, just to sit back and talk about it.
Love that. So I want to go back to you. What did that season teach you about yourself?
Probably faith, even though I will sometimes be mad at God, sometimes will just be so sad. A friend of mine from church told me that she remembered one day a week after uh, having the baby, and I came to church, and she said she remembers my hands being raised high in praise, and she said she couldn't believe it. I think as I think about that time when the crisis first happened, it's just all about the faith, trying to get through this. But then as time goes on, you still have your faith, but your grief obviously is still there, and it's still your faith and your grief are just kind of wrestling with each other. And I realized that I had a lot more faith than I thought, and I had a lot more resilience than I thought. But I also realized that I think God gives certain journeys to us because he knows that we can handle it and he needs us to do something with it. So if we think about you and what you went through and your profound grief, and now you're doing this podcast, right? You think about me and my profound grief, and I'm telling my story. So I think that God gives us journeys. And I think what I've learned from it is to remove it from my personal experience to kind of make it a world experience. And we had an article that was done about our journey in Parents Magazine, and and it was about faith, and it was a Parents Magazine article, the feature story. And I remember getting so many responses from women on that article, and then I realized, okay, God, like it wouldn't have been what I would have picked for myself, to be honest. But hey, I understand.
But I like that you said that because a lot of people, I always talk about how God speaks to me.
Hmm.
And a lot of people ask, well, how do you know when he's speaking to you? And I always say it may not be through traditional means where you hear his voice in his head, but it's something that somebody says, like he sends a
Right.
messenger. Even sometimes you to examine your beliefs, and then you have to hear these messages that he's telling you. And when I wrote my first book, Protected by
Yeah.
Purpose, I never thought that I would be sharing that story.
And it's just listening and having discernment on it. Like I'm very clear. I don't always do everything that God is telling me to do about it. And I know that there's more that he wants me to do about this story. I just got to get more disciplined. But I have a better vision now of why I had to go through this.
So you were going through all of that loss and grief while still building a career, a
It's
very
crazy.
prestigious career. So how did you navigate that?
Ooh, Lord. It's funny. I remember after I lost my third baby, and my doctor said you need to see a therapist because you probably are feeling a lot more grief than what you probably recognize. And I remember seeing a Black woman, a Christian woman, and I wanted to try again, but I didn't want to admit because I'm like, at work, how am I going to go back and tell them that I'm pregnant again? And she said, they have a choice and you have a choice. Every decision has an impact. So if you do get pregnant again and you go to work and you say, I'm pregnant again, they have a choice. They can say, we don't want you here. But at the end of the day, that's all that's gonna happen. And she made it so simple, right? And I thought, she's right. I would just obviously I would go through these devastating circumstances and I would go right back to work. Devastating, go right back to work. Devastating, go right back to work because I still had a career to build and I still had a child to raise. But I also worked each one of my jobs. Well, the two that I was working at the time, they, I don't think they fully understand what I went through, but they made space for my grief. I went to work every day. I think there was an appreciation that, wow, this woman is coming into work after what she went through. But the job that I had when I lost my second and third baby, which was Quest Diagnostics, my general counsel was so vested in me having a child so that when I got pregnant again, and I was just like, oh my God, I can't tell this man. He was all in. And when I had Caleb, he had a picture of Caleb in his office. So I say that to say that I just kept building and kept doing what Black women do, right? We just keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. But it does matter where you work. And you have to say to yourself, every decision has an impact, and you have to decide whether it's worth it or not. And I made a decision that it was worth it. And if it had an impact on my career, I'll get another job. But it was definitely difficult because I had to show up to work every day and I had so much sadness inside of me. I remember walking for lunch with a colleague after I lost my first baby. And I said, I couldn't understand why people were so happy and they were just walking like nothing was wrong. And I would say, don't, like in my mind, I would say, don't they know like how sad I am? Don't they know that the worst thing ever has happened to me? But I would see them just walking like normal. And that I could never reconcile that. And years later, she told me, I felt your sad energy like as we were walking around that day. It's like, wow, really? So you just keep moving.
Yeah. I know for me, the work was part of my coping mechanism.
Yeah, you know what? I think for me, work was just something that I knew I just had to do. And it was certainly a distraction because you were busy all day. I'm ambitious, so I still had goals. And I would just like, oh, well, let me just go back to those goals. And I would just do what I always had done.
So you took a 2-year hiatus from going
Yeah.
to become a certified life coach. What was happening internally that made you step away from such a prestigious role?
Girl, probably a midlife crisis, to be honest. Seriously, I just was not happy. I don't know if I was depressed or if I was just have the blues and sadness, or whatever it was. I had this job that most people would say, "Oh, you're doing great." And my job probably felt like everything is great. I would get these awards. My job would buy a table. Everything was beautiful, but I would literally be sitting in the parking lot crying and trying to get myself together to go to work. Like, you got to get in this building, you got to get in this building. And I just didn't know why. And I would work out, trying to work it out. I meditate every day and nothing worked. And literally, I made a decision a year before that I was just going to leave and without a job. But I had a great team. And to be honest, I had a great team of women. And I knew that if I left, that I wasn't sure if I didn't set them up for success, that they would land well. And so I literally planned for a year. And when that year was done and my plan was finished, I walked into my boss's office and I told him that I was going to leave. And he thought, wow, where are you going? I'm nowhere. And that was shocking to him because, as you could imagine, I was there was three of us, the highest ranking Black women at the company. He probably felt that everything was going great. He couldn't understand it. I didn't have a logical explanation for him. It wasn't like anything happened. And I just said, I just don't want to do this anymore. And I'm just going to take time. After I did that, there was this sort of fantasy that everyone wanted to live vicariously through me. I had all these lunch invites and dinner invites, and everyone romanticized it. Oh, you're leaving to go follow your dream and your purpose. You're retiring. And I'm like, first of all, I'm not retiring because I don't have enough money to retire. So let's get that straight. But it wasn't that. I was just sad and I just didn't know what I wanted and what did I wanted to do. And so I met with the mentor and she said, do not jump into a job because you will do that, and think about something you love and just do that while you figure it out. And I said, I love coaching and mentoring people. I wanted to go to school for coaching because as a lawyer, I knew that I would normally tell people what they should do. And as a coach, you don't. And I wanted to be skilled and trained. And so I decided to go to coaching school and I loved it and became a certified life coach. And then I opened up my own company, Measure of Ambition. And it's funny because you talk about ambition, and that is actually the whole premise of Measure of Ambition is that in life, ambition is just a measure of our life, right? It's just one piece. And so it's like your entire life, we focus so much as women on like just striving and ambition. But for me, it was sort of like what measure of my ambition is important for me in my life right now. And for me, it was just trying to find what was it that was missing in my life and how can I spend the time to repair myself to get to a better place.
I love that. So I remember when it was time for me to leave corporate America. I remember pulling in the garage one day and for the first time in 20 years saying, I don't want to go in. And that's when the light bulb clicked and I was like, I have to leave. Thank you for sharing that story. I have another question. So what did coaching teach you that law never could?
Coaching taught me more reflection and thinking, not just only with my brain, but with my heart and with my sort of spirit. And coaching also taught me to slow down, figure things out, because everything that you are experiencing, as I coach people, and I've been coached, you realize that these are not new human experiences, to be honest. And usually when I'm starting a new client, the thing I always tell them, you will cry by the second session. And please know that whatever you say to me, I've heard it before. So coaching really kind of teaches you that. And then whereas law is very factual based and, non-emotional, coaching brings lots of emotion, but it also brings, a sense of problem solving that's specific for that person. That's the part about coaching for me is that there's always a solution and it's so personal. It's so personal to you. And getting people to understand that is probably the most difficult part because we all live our lives objectively of what does society define for me? What do my family, my friends, the industry I'm in? But really, life is really, and success is so personal to you. And that's what coaching is all about.
So if someone is looking to engage in your coaching services, how do they find you?
So you can just email me at info@shirellspeaks.com. Or you can also go on my website at www.shirellspeaks.com. So either way, there will be a way to connect me, but directly info@shirellspeaks.com.
Thank you for that. So what does success mean to you now that grief, leadership, and legacy sit at the same table?
Ooh, and I don't know if I'm sure a lot of it has to do with maturity and experiences. And, as you know, after you go through such hard stuff, your perspective just changes. And so for me, success is really about like peace. Success is way not even related to what somebody else is doing. Like I used to be thinking about that and then would judge my own life based upon what I see other people doing. And I remember my therapist saying once to me, "You don't even want to do that." I'm like, "Do it. Why am I struggling? Because I don't even want to do that." And she's like, "I don't know. Why are you worried about that?" And I was like, "I don't know." So I think for me, right now, as I said, it's really about peace, and it's really about trying to figure out what does God wants me to do? What is it that God has for me? And how do I make sure I don't miss it? Because that actually was what I worry about a lot more right now is that am I missing it, God? Are you telling me and I'm not getting it because I'm so distracted with all this other stuff? And I don't have FOMO anymore. I don't have a need to actually please anyone. There's so much more for me that it's about my role right now is not as much about fulfilling my own success, but where do I fit in making sure other people can be successful, right? It's not me looking for that next position, but how do I get my team members set up so that they can be successful? How do I teach them and give them the experiences that they need? How do I teach young people? I'm very passionate about giving young people access and opportunity. That to me is the most important thing for me to focus on this earth today is I have to make sure that the young people in our community have access and opportunity. It's not about me anymore. It's really about how do I become a bridge for them.
I love that. And that's something that you and I have in common. When I
Yes.
think about my legacy, I always think about how have I helped others.
I mean, the human mind, because I read a lot of neuroscience books as I'm geeky about it, the human mind wants to please. And so, to deny that it's not happening in your life, it's what you build and it's how you mature and it's how you are being intentional to say, nah, that's just not what I'm going to do. That I'm not seeking to please that person. And what is my spirit and my mind telling me what to do?
So before we close, I want to invite you to uncrack the code for us. So I'm going to give you three areas, and I simply need you to give us your code for each one. So the first one is, what's your code for leading with both strength and humanity?
So for me, that is courage and caring for that. Just living with courage. I don't always have it every day. I don't. I manage fear all the time. And I know it's a big inhibitor for people to move forward. But then there are times that I have extraordinary amount of courage and I just do. And then just caring about people and caring about outcomes.
Love it. What's your code for rebuilding after loss?
A lot of prayer and time. Time doesn't make it go away. What happens is time just gives you other ways to incorporate the grief into your life. That's all.
Love that. And what's your code for turning pain into purpose?
So that one is I really, really try to be intentional in just remembering that God chose me for a reason. And while it would not have been what I have chosen for myself, I cannot go through this pain for nothing. Just can't go through it for nothing, right? He gives us beauty for our ashes, but no pain should be left unaddressed. Like you have to say to yourself, how do I go through this tremendous pain that I went through and just leave it for myself? So that's kind of how I just try to focus on making sure that it's ultimately for a purpose and it's a purpose that God has designed for me. And I pray every morning my prayer is God, don't let me miss it. Because I will. My human nature, I'm going to miss it. Please don't let me miss it. Now, don't let me miss it. Don't let me miss the opportunity. Don't let me miss what you're telling me. Just don't let me miss it.
Well, Shirell, thank you for
Thank
your
you.
honesty and your wisdom and for being my very first guest on the
So
Reinvention
excited about that.
Code. So I'm truly grateful for this conversation, and I know others will be too. So, to everyone listening, thank you for spending this time with us. If this conversation resonated with you, I hope it reminds you that reinvention is always possible. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep uncracking your code. As always, I wish you much peace, much joy, and many blessings. Thank you for listening to the Reinvention Code. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who's stepping into their next season. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a conversation. Remember, reinvention isn't random, it has a code. I'll see you next time.